This is Wink Tracks the Tropics, powered by the Weather Authority.
When the tropics are active and timing is everything, the Weather Authority is keeping you prepared.
The latest update did come in from the National Hurricane Center. Helene moving north-northeast. Winds have increased up to 90 miles per hour.
Keeping you informed.
It's now 170 miles northwest of us, and as we had mentioned, this is a major Cat 4 hurricane. This is going to have major landfall implications.
Southwest Florida has seen its fair share of storms in the past few years.
We are leaving immediately after this because it is not safe. You're starting to see some of these debris, sticks flying up and out, and it's one of the reasons why Sanibel is evacuated. It clearly is not safe out here.
But our slice of paradise has bounced back in ways we'd never expected.
It's tough.
We had each other, and that's a good thing.
I wouldn't have made it without Marianne. We're going to make it, though. We're going to make it.
Wink News has been there with you every step of the way. That won't change.
Yes, we avoid the worst part of the storm, but the wind field's growing and the pressures are deepening. We're going to feel more of that influence on the back end with the surge.
From forecast cones to safety tips, the Weather Authority team has you covered. You're watching Wink Tracks the Tropics.
All right, welcome in and happy Friday, everyone. We have made it to the end of the week. I hope you had a wonderful week so far, and I'll tell you what, folks, weather-wise, across the Sunshine State, we couldn't end it on a better note. It makes you just want to get out there and enjoy it. We'll talk about what those conditions are, what we can expect locally over the next several days when it comes to limited rain chances and a warming trend. There's a lot to discuss there. We also have some fun turkey tidbits headed your way here towards the end of the show as well. Don't worry, Oceana's going to fill you in on those. And speaking of, let's go ahead and bring in our panel today. Meteorologist Oceana Hayden, check it in. How we doing? Happy Friday.
Great. Happy Friday. I'm so excited for the weekend. It's going to be beautiful.
Absolutely is. We've got low humidity. We've got lots of sunshine. Not much to complain about there. Also, not a lot to complain about in the tropics. The reason why? Things are still nice and quiet out there, but there's always something to talk about when it comes to the tropics. That's why we're here today on your Friday edition of Wink Tracks the Tropics. Remember, everyone, this is an interactive platform. If you ever have any questions, comments, anything that pops up at all, want to let us know where you're watching from, go ahead and drop it in the comment section on YouTube and Facebook. We would love to hear from you. And without further ado, what do you go ahead and say? We go ahead and start this thing off. You know, I'm always going to start off with that countdown clock, folks. Each and every day we inch closer to the end of hurricane season is a good day in my book. That latest countdown, 16 days away from November 30th. That marks the conclusion of the 2025 Atlantic hurricane season. Let's get to the graphics. From the National Hurricane Center, nothing is out there across the Atlantic, Gulf, and the Caribbean, and they don't expect anything new to develop for at least the next 7 days. Of course, we want to know what's going to be happening after the next 7 days. To that, we look to the Climate Prediction Center's extended tropical outlook, and you tell me, Josh, this map looks blank. What's going on here? You having a mistake? No, I am not. That means that the Climate Prediction Center is also not watching any new areas across the Atlantic, Gulf, and Caribbean over the next 2 to 3 weeks, which, yes, does bring us through the end of hurricane season. This has been a very welcome trend and a continued trend over the past couple of weeks at this point. I do always like to show you what the models are spitting out each and every day. This is brand new information from this morning. This is the European model and its ensemble members depicting where areas of low pressure could develop. Now, if you've stuck with us on Wink Tracks the Tropics over the past several days, we've talked about an area of interest that some of the models have been hinting at in the southern Caribbean near Central America. Now, although only a few of the European model ensemble members have been depicting anything, at least it was something, right? It was something to look at. Today, that European model says absolutely no way. We are not expecting any of those areas of low pressure to develop there in the southern Caribbean over the next 10 days. This is a very welcome sight, and the European model, of course, not the only one we look at. We look at the GFS, which is the American model, but today I wanted to show you the Google AI model because we've talked about this one a little bit over the past few days and the fact that it's performed fairly well this season, especially towards the back half of the season. So similar story, the Google AI model also has ensemble members, dozens of different initial starting points, different things that they expect to be happening in the atmosphere, And yes, this one also depicting a very quiet scene through at least November 24th with no new areas of low pressure to develop. You see one there in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Not much expected from that one. So, you know, when we look at late season, right, we talk about where can these things develop. Pretty much the Caribbean at this point is the only area in which it's possible for these tropical systems to develop. The reason why, there's still a lot of energy down there, right? What this graphic is depicting is tropical cyclone heat potential, right? So this is going to show you which areas of the ocean is there enough heat content, not only enough heat content at the surface, but also extending from the surface dozens of feet down below. All right, so you need not only just water at the surface that's warm, but you need it to extend deep. That's exactly what you still have right now in the Caribbean. You can actually kind of see those purple colors representing the highest available heat content, the red just slightly less. You notice around Jamaica, that's where Melissa passed through. You don't see those purples, mainly because it ate up a lot of that energy, especially the days just after making landfall and moving through the Caribbean. So there's still enough juice down there, but the thing is, there's too much wind shear. The conditions just aren't favorable for these areas of low pressure to pop up anymore. In addition to the oceanic heat content, we can also look at sea surface temperatures, right? And you can see, thanks to those several cold fronts, specifically the one that just moved through this past Monday, the waters surrounding the continental United States are much cooler at this point. Off the coast of southwest Florida, 67. That's the temperature of the water there. 69 degrees up near the Big Bend. Now you'll notice there's a little bit of a warm streak on Florida's east coast just off of it. That's that little current of warm water that moves around the state. Water temperatures there in the low 80s. The warmest water temperatures, of course, are still located in the Caribbean, deep into the Caribbean, where those cold fronts haven't been able to penetrate as of yet. So, with all of this said, I'm getting closer and closer to making that call to where likely not going to be seeing any more named storms through the end of hurricane season, November 30th. The last one was Melissa. If we do get another one, the next name on the list would be Nestor. Oceana, how are you feeling today about those chances of development over the next couple of weeks?
I have to agree with you. I think that the chances are very slim in terms of seeing Nestor. As you could see by all of those ensembles, I mean, nobody's really confident about any sort of development whatsoever. And not only that, none of them are consistent really with each other, except for maybe the chance, I guess, in the middle of the Atlantic. But notice how there's very few ensemble members out there in general. With the Euro, I guess the Google AI was that the one that had a little bit more. I mean, regardless, it's not going to impact us if anything were to happen there. And I still think that the chances are pretty low, considering we are seeing the water temperatures head on down, and I like our chances a lot.
And it's a lot more difficult this time of the year for something to develop in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, for sure. Sometimes these models can still just pick up areas of low pressure. Sometimes they turn out to be extratropical systems, right? They don't have the warm core. They don't have the characteristics to be actually considered tropical. You can get areas of low pressure. They move across the country all the time. Sometimes they don't become tropical, so I think that's kind of what these two models are picking up on. But yeah, I think you hit it right there. I mean, I'm really liking our chances here over the next couple of weeks. And we kind of talked about it yesterday, how the season ends on the 30th of November. The chances of seeing a December storm are very low. We've only seen a handful. There was only one that's ever made landfall in the United States, just so happened to be in Bonita Beach. If you were trying to figure out when that was, you weren't alive yet. It was 100 years ago on December 1st of 1925. That's the only landfalling tropical system in the contiguous United States in the month of December. So just goes to show how rare that is. Now, you know, when we look at this hurricane season as a whole, right, 13 named storms, that's pretty much just below the average. It's on the lower end of the forecast spectrum from NOAA. Hurricanes got up to 5, which again, a little bit on the low side, but major hurricanes, that's actually what exceeded the average and also was right in the middle of that forecast guidance. And again, just kind of crazy to see that of 5 hurricanes, 4 of which were able to become major hurricanes, which should be a little bit more rare. But just due to the, I think, lack of storms out there, it allowed just the perfect ingredients to set up for a handful of these hurricanes to pretty much explode, rapidly intensify, one of which was Melissa. And Oceana, you and I covered this one extensively. You know, we've tracked it for a long time, right? And unfortunately, we saw some of the impacts there in Jamaica. Do you want to talk a little bit, you know, just about the landfall when we saw that?
Yeah, I mean, it was worst case scenario for Jamaica. We saw it strengthening and strengthening and continuing to strengthen right before it made landfall, literally at its peak intensity, if I'm not mistaken. And we know it was the #1, tied with the Labor Day hurricane as being the most intense in terms of the lowest pressure at landfall, 892 millibars. I mean, that was very bad news for Jamaica. And before it made landfall, we've talked about this a few times, but we were kind of expecting some sort of eyewall replacement because it is pretty rare to see a storm this intense not go through that, not have that moment of weakness. And unfortunately, it didn't look like that happened. It actually continued to intensify right before it made landfall on Jamaica, bringing a lot of those rains to the Black River community. I know that's where they had a lot of surge.
Right.
Saw a lot of trees down. We've talked about it from those aerial views from drones and planes. There's a big scar through the western part of Jamaica where it went through, and it really was the worst case scenario for that island, unfortunately.
Yeah, you'd think it's about sustained winds of 185 miles per hour. Some of the wind gusts even higher than that. We're getting into EF2, EF3 tornado category at that point. You know, sometimes, especially like in the Midwest, when you see a tornado move through some farmland, it leaves behind like a burn scar, right? You can clearly see where it was. That's what Oceana was talking about there. Similar story with Hurricane Melissa, where it made that path, you know, probably about a 20-mile wide swath of where the worst of those winds were. Absolutely, you can just see that scar of damage and devastation there in western Jamaica. Now, our very own meteorologist, Nikki Sheeks, was able to do a little bit more of a deep dive when it comes to Hurricane Melissa and kind of the impacts and some more details about that. I believe we have that queued up. We'll go ahead and take that whenever you guys are ready.
It is going to be devastating for the Caribbean, especially Jamaica.
Hurricane Melissa shattered records in the Atlantic Basin last month.
It was in a very favorable setup from an atmospheric perspective.
Melissa was the strongest storm to ever make landfall in Jamaica's recorded history with sustained winds of 185 miles per hour. It tied the Labor Day hurricane of 1935 and Hurricane Dorian for the strongest sustained winds at landfall in the Atlantic Basin. And Melissa's central pressure of 892 millibars makes it the third most intense Caribbean hurricane ever.
This was a Cat 5 hurricane that was intensifying as it was making landfall.
It also shattered lives.
There were some communities that were cut off in terms of roadways, especially in the mountainous terrain where bridges and other roads were just washed away. And that limited people being able to move in and out of communities.
And the island could be picking up the pieces for some time. According to AccuWeather's preliminary estimates, Melissa caused about $50 billion in damage across the Caribbean.
22 billion of that is in Jamaica alone. And when you look at the economic output of Jamaica on an average year, the annual gross domestic product in Jamaica is around $20 billion US dollars. So the total damage and economic loss here is going to be at more than 1 time the annual complete economic output of the economy.
Damage this catastrophic could take years of recovery, changing the landscape and the lives of millions.
There's going to be a long tail of negative impacts here too in terms of both health, physical and mental health for the survivors of this significant storm. Also, many businesses may close. They may not be able to ever reopen, especially in the western part of Jamaica that was so hard hit, and associated job losses that will go along with that. And then a negative impact to the tourism, which is so critical for the Jamaican economy.
I'm Winkie News Weather Authority meteorologist Nikki Sheeks.
Yeah, you know, it's kind of, you know, it's incredible and sad to see the damage that's come out of there because, again, seeing a hurricane of this strength, it's very, very rare. So not very often do we see that level of devastation. Obviously, here in Southwest Florida, just 3 years ago, we saw similar situations mainly due to surge, you know, especially across Fort Myers Beach and portions of our coast. You know, Oceana, you were here for that. You know, kind of, how does that kind of just, you know, relate to seeing some of those images versus what we saw come out of home?
Yeah, I mean, Hurricane Ian was an absolute devastation to a lot of folks here. It really had an impact on most likely everyone that lives here just because it is our coastline. We're known for our coastlines, and specifically Fort Myers Beach. I grew up going to Fort Myers Beach every single summer. We had a cottage there all my life, and it was just a beautiful spot to be. It was so lively. It was definitely it had a lot of character. And it's nice to see that good news is it is coming back, and it's actually coming back better than before. But, you know, it was a really big blow. I mean, there were videos of the cottages being picked up and washed down the street, and it's similar to the videos we kind of saw from Jamaica where the streets were floods. And that was actually the same kind of scenario in downtown Naples and Park Shore. I go to those beaches a lot, and I remember seeing on some live cams, I think there was actually a news reporter on the Park Shore beach there in one of the high rises, and they had a video on the news of what looked like a stream, like a river through our own roadways, just like that video we just saw in Jamaica. I mean, it's shockingly similar, and it's horrible to see that happen to someone else because we know exactly how that is, especially not having power for so long, it taking away something that everyone loves so much, especially, I mean, Fort Myers Beach saw so much of that damage, and then Matlacha did eventually too with the mix of that and Milton. So we've had a fair share. So I'm very happy to say, though, that here in Southwest Florida, we've had a break, which is really nice. We deserve that.
We absolutely do. And if you're watching right now live, you go ahead and tell us your experiences with our local hurricanes here in Southwest Florida. You know, on a lighter note, I am happy to say that I've seen a lot of outreach from across the globe going to Western Jamaica and really helping them out and, you know, just trying to provide as much of a helpful hand as they can. It's going to be a very long road to recovery. All right, so thank you, Nikki, for sharing that with us. I do want to switch gears here, talk a little bit about our local forecast coming up in Southwest Florida over the next several days. We're in for a little bit of a pattern change. I know most of this week has been more so on the chilly side. We will be staying dry. High pressure is going to help us out with that. But as the position of that area of high pressure shifts off to the east coast of Florida, we'll get a little bit of a change in wind direction. Now, instead of the winds being out of the north, continuing to filter in the cool air, winds will be out of the east. That will bring a little bit more of a warmer air mass underneath the state of Florida. And in turn, we're not going to see any more of those cold mornings. Sorry, everyone, including myself. That was really enjoying the open windows at night and the beautiful drives into work in the morning. Hey, tonight's not going to be too bad. I'm expecting upper 50s when you wake up tomorrow, but then we'll be more so in the 60s, especially as we look ahead towards the upcoming work week. That's our low temperatures. How about the high temperatures, right? Those will also warm up a little bit. 80 today, low 80s this weekend, mid 80s as we look ahead towards the middle of the work week next week. Now, sometimes when you get this pattern change and you get the warmer air moving in, you know, sometimes, actually most of the time, you do see an increase in moisture, in humidity. Here's the good news. Our dew points are expected to stay in the 50s over the next several days. Any dew point that's below 60 for Southwest Florida actually feels good out there. All right, so yes, it may be getting warmer, but it's not going to be feeling like, you know, even early fall out there. It's still going to be feeling a little bit more of like a late fall, winter time pattern because of the lower humidity. Oceana, I'm sure you're excited about that, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the humidity is what gets me. In the summer, all I want to do is get up north where they have those cooler nights, they're drier nights. So I mean, we can be in the 80s as long as that humidity stays low. I think that's a pretty big game changer for us here in Southwest Florida. But I think it's funny, if we were to see highs at 82 in July, we would be so ecstatic.
Yeah.
And now we're kind of spoiled. We see highs at 82 and we're like, oh, it's going to be so hot. Like, it's kind of funny. And our lows, you were like, oh, the lows are going to be in the 60s.
Right.
Like,
it's just
at the beginning of the season, we were like, lows in the 60s.
Right.
So it's so funny how it gets as the season goes on. We start to really change our vision on it. And it's like, we're at that point where we're pretty spoiled with the weather that we had this week. In my opinion, I know the mornings were pretty frigid, but those afternoons in the 60s.
To make up for it.
I mean, so perfect. I was in heaven. I loved it.
So, you know, we're looking ahead, right, even past the next 7 days. This was something that you brought up a lot yesterday in your newscast. Do you want to talk a little bit about that extended outlook looking ahead past the next 7 days?
Yeah, it's actually, you said this before, but a weather flip-flop. So we actually saw some below average temperatures early this week, but what that did was actually brought some somewhat warmer temperatures to the other side of the United States, and that kind of works. That's how our jet stream works. A lot of the times, I mean, we saw Montana was warmer than it was here in Florida at one point on Tuesday, so now we're kind of switching gears. So in 8 to 14 days, they're expecting above average temperatures from now through the next 8 days. But even after that, this is looking at Thanksgiving week above average temperatures here for the eastern half of the United States, whereas now the western half of the United States could actually see below average. And I'm seeing some things that they could really see some cold, frigid temperatures for Thanksgiving. But I do want to reiterate, I got a comment on one of my Facebook posts yesterday, and someone asked, does this mean we're going to have a hot Thanksgiving? Not necessarily hot. What we mean by above average is just above what that temperature would be for the time of year. So right now, I believe our average high is 82, but in 2 weeks from now, I think that high is averaging at 80 degrees. So all that means is above average, we could still just be at an 82, 83 as our high for the day. So we're not talking a Thanksgiving in the 90s necessarily when you say above average, but it just means, I mean, we're not going to be likely highs in the 70s like we would I think I would want for Thanksgiving, especially when you're in a packed house full of people.
And you got a belly full of food, right? You're already sweating in the first place. You need something to cool you down. When you walk outside, Grandma's already got the nice chair taken.
Exactly. Like, I would prefer it to be chilly so you can have the doors open.
Right.
But, you know, I don't think we're expecting anything outrageous in terms of Thanksgiving temperatures. It's just, when we say above average, we just mean above that 80-degree mark for that week.
Right, yeah, and you make a good point. With this graphic, it's actually the probability of below versus above average temperature. So, yeah, let's take the eastern half of the country, for example. The darker the color, that just means the higher the probability that we're going to be experiencing above average temperatures. Above average by this time could mean 81 degrees, and the average is 80. It's just a confidence level of that happening. Yes, the warmer it's forecast to be, the higher the confidence, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be outrageously warm. And what is Thanksgiving? Is like the 28th this year, or is it the 27th?
I think it's the 28th.
All right, it's the 28th. Yeah, there's also some interesting patterns that look to be taking shape towards the end of this month. Yeah. So, you know, this is pretty certain, I'd especially say throughout next week for sure. And probably, you know, into next weekend as well. And then as we really approach Thanksgiving, I think things are going to shake up big time, especially for the northern half of the country.
Definitely, I'm seeing that too.
Yeah, so, you know, we'll have to see how that impacts us here in Southwest Florida, because we're kind of a little bit on a different climate agenda compared to the rest of the country when it comes to those wintertime storms. But alas, we'll see. I do want to talk a little bit about rain chances over the next 7 days, and it's really simple to understand because there's nothing out there. Look at that. 0% rain coverage today, this weekend, all the way throughout the upcoming work week next week as well. The reason why? A big lack of moisture, all right? You need water, droplets, thousands of feet above our heads, right? You need those to condensate, you need them to drain down on us. You're not going to have that, all right? So we don't have the fuel for the rain out there. We also don't have the energy. We don't have the lift for those showers out there either. So a big lack of ingredients for that rain, which is typical for the dry season. But again, you know, typically you'll get a front that moves through, brings that moisture, brings that energy. That's just not going to be happening over the next 7 days. And even looking ahead, I'll show you our 10-day forecast now. Really, the next best chance for rain is likely not going to be until not this weekend, but next weekend. And even then, I'm not loving our chances right now. There is going to be a pretty strong storm system that sweeps across the middle of the country, portions of the deep south late next week into the upcoming weekend. But by the time it gets here, it's probably going to be a lot weaker, and it might not have much rain at all. So that's why, for that reason, we're only keeping that rain coverage at 30% for Saturday. So unfortunately, these sprinklers are likely going to have to keep running for our thirsty lawns and gardens out there. Just something to keep in mind. And again, we talked about that warming trend. It continues throughout the upcoming week. And again, those morning lows also continue to climb. But nonetheless, when you factor in the low humidity, I mean, it's going to be beautiful if you have any outdoor plans, not only this weekend, but even into next week as well. All right, we've got a few minutes left, and we have a fun new little segment that we want to bring to you. Oceana, I will let you take this away because there's a couple really fun, little interesting fun facts. I'm a big fan of fun facts in here.
Yes.
So go ahead, let's hear it.
All right, so this is called Turkey Tidbits. So that name was actually from Josh, but what I wanted to do is, as you get closer to the holidays, you know, you got that table talk. Here are some fun weather facts. I figure if you're watching Wink Tracks the Tropics, you're probably like me and Josh. You like the weather a little bit more than the average person, which is, I think, an amazing thing. We need more of us. But anyways, here are some fun facts you can bring up at the dinner table, one of which, snow is not white. I know a lot of us know this, but if you don't, it's really, ice is clear. It just appears white due to the light scattering off of the ice crystals. So we all know light scattering off of things, like that's how we get clouds that appear white, but it's also the same with snow. This one is really neat.
Yeah, let's see you try to pronounce this one.
It's petrichor. Petrichor. So the smell of rain, there's actually a scent, and it's an oil that is produced by plants and bacteria, other things that are outside that they produce when it rains, and it's called petrichor, and it's actually the scent that you smell after a nice rain shower. We're not crazy when you say you could smell rain. It's actually a real thing, and it's called petrichor.
Now, like, I feel like you can smell it the most, especially on a summer day when it's
Yes,
really hot out there and everything really heats up, and all of a sudden when that first cooling rain is just like maybe a few miles away, that's when you can really start to smell it out there. So
oh yeah, no,
that was interesting.
Petrichor is definitely more common in the summer months because of the warm and the humidity. 100%. I love that fact. I'm going to be using that one at the dinner table.
People are
and
gonna
then
love it.
this is also something that's interesting and you might not know, and it might not make sense, but it has to do with not only the high pressure and low pressure like in the atmosphere. The higher you go, the lower the pressure. So there's higher pressure pushing down, so that makes things like clouds, think about this, they actually weigh more than 1 million pounds. And this is because the water droplets, the millions of tiny water droplets that make up one cloud actually make the overall density of the cloud less than that of the surrounding dry air. So if you think about it, the H2O molecule, the water vapor molecule, actually weighs less than the nitrogen and the oxygen molecules it replaces that's in dry air. So you don't need to explain all that maybe at the dinner table, but if you want it, I mean, it is 100% factual. Cumulus clouds specifically can weigh 1.1 million pounds, which I think is so interesting. A lot of people don't know that one.
Listen, if you make it through the two facts up front and then your uncle's still sticking around at the table, he's going to want to hear that third one.
He's going to want to hear that third one, exactly.
That is interesting, though, because, you know, if you think about it, if you put that giant cloud in a shoebox, I mean, all of a sudden, it's impossible to pick up, right? Density is a pretty crazy thing. So is science. So thank you, Oceana, for bringing us these turkey tidbits. We're looking forward to more of these leading up to Thanksgiving. Each and every day, I want to see some brand new ones out
I've got them.
Beautiful. Well, hey, you know what, guys? You know, just to recap again, hurricane season, it's winding down very nicely. There's still some things to discuss. There's still some model trends to watch for. That's what we're going to be doing for you all throughout the work week next week. We'll also talk a little bit more about perhaps that storm system that'll be sweeping across the country, the impacts that could have, and if it's even going to reach down here in Southwest Florida. So there's a lot to look forward to next week. I encourage you to tune back in on Monday, same time, same place at 11 a.m. But for now, folks, have a wonderful rest of your Friday. Enjoy the weekend. It's going to be beautiful out there, and we'll see you on the flip side. Have a great one.